Right. Today we are going to discuss another contemporary issue in accounting, financial reporting, and it is about the IFRS adoption, and international accounting. So, when come to the today's environment, you would find that there are over 180 countries. There are over 180 countries are currently adopting IFRS, including Sri Lanka. So in 1st of January, since 1st of January 2012, we have converged our local accounting standard with that of the global accounting standard. So that is IFRS. So consequently, from period starting from 1st of January 2012, we have the SLFRSs and LKS in our context. So likewise, it was not just a phenomenon that take place in Sri Lanka, but apart from that, it was a global phenomenon. I would say the Iasb, International Accounting Standards Board, is the one who dominate at present when it comes to the accounting standards. So the USA, so they have their own set of accounting standards, as we have referred time to time. That was US gaps, but when you look at the global phenomena, the rest of the world, they are by and large, they are going by IFRS. So therefore, it is a very contemporary phenomenon. So it keeps growing. So it keeps growing day by day. So therefore, this is an evolving area, right? Okay, so that is going to be our today's discussion, the IFRS adoption and international accounting. So we'll be looking at the projects of convergence, the projects of harmonization. So whether we can go for one set of accounting standards for the whole world. So that is going to be the ultimate objective of the International Accounting Standards Board. So we'll be looking at whether they can go for that, right? Okay, so it is a brief introduction to the chapter. Having said that, let me move on to the learning outcomes. At the end of today's discussion, you must be able to discuss what is international accounting. So you need to have a kind of idea. What do you mean by international accounting? So yes, at the moment you may be having a certain idea, but we can develop on that. You can have a very comprehensive, broader idea as to what is international accounting. Then we are going to identify the reasons for diversity of international accounting practices. So though we are looking for the one set of accounting standards for the whole world, but there are certain practical limitations. So the world has failed to achieve that. The IASB has failed to achieve that to a certain extent. That was largely due to the different factors, the different environmental factors, maybe the culture, maybe the environment, maybe the economic and political reasons, and even the religion would have made it difficult. The process of harmonization, the process of convergence has made difficult. So we cannot go by one set of accounting standards for the whole world. Then we are going to distinguish the different terminology used in the international context, the harmonization, the convergence. So we'll be looking at them. And finally, we'll be discussing so the international adoption of this IFRS and their benefits and limitation, right? Okay, so this is going to be the today's discussion, right? So in today's presentation, I'll be taking you initially through the definition of international accounting. First, I'll take you through the definition. Then we'll be looking at the diversity, the different environmental factors, predominantly the culture and the economic and political factors that will create the difference in the accounting practices in different countries. And then we'll be looking at the environmental influence on accounting, and then international adoption of IFRS, including the benefits limitation. So this is going to be the outline for the day. Right. So first we'll see, in order to discuss this international accounting harmonization or convergence, first you need to know what do you mean by this international accounting. So before going for any, so do you have any kind of idea? Would you like to add something? What do you mean by international accounting? What that really means to you? When we say accounting, yes, certainly we all have kind of understanding. But when it comes to international accounting, what it means to you? Yes, you can add something. මොකක්ද මේ international accounting කියන්නේ? Yeah, okay, good. Initiated the globally recognized guidelines for accounting. Yes, yeah, wonderful idea. Globally recognized guidelines for accounting. Yeah, we can say the standard rules, yeah, guidelines for accounting, and it is globally recognized. Okay, you talk about a universal thing. Yes, very correct. So that really sounds good. Similarly, so that may be something that means, it was about the globally accepted guidelines, globally recognized. Based on the international accounting framework, we prepare and present general, I think you try to mean general purpose financial statements, no? Yes, that is also adding a good value. International accounting framework. You mean that international accounting stands for international financial reporting. Sorry, yeah, the Iasb conceptual framework for financial reporting. No, so based on that, you are preparing and presenting the general purpose financial statement. Yeah, good. The idea is there. So likewise, yes, you align some sort of a understanding, and I must tell, yes, your understanding is to a large extent, yes, you are correct, right? Okay, now we may see what it really means. Yeah, okay, we have other suggestion. The accounting in international point of view. Yes, that also makes sense. Counting in an international point of view, you are going beyond the local boundaries, and you are looking at accounting from a global point of view, international point of view. Yeah, that is also there. Good. Right. So then incorporating the ideas what you have said, we can take that to a summary like this. You can say it is about the comparison of accounting in different countries. In international accounting, what it may happen, it is about a description or a comparison of accounting in different countries. And or even you can add to that, it is the accounting dimension of international transaction. So, there are international transaction when it comes to different countries. There are transactions between the countries. And when it comes to the transaction, we are taking care of the accounting dimension. So recently, we used to hear that we are taking this, the COVID vaccine from different countries. No, even in the last couple of days, there was a hot topic. There was a hot debate in the social media that when it comes to the Bangladesh, they managed to purchase this vaccine from China comparatively lower cost, right? But when it comes to Sri Lanka, we have paid something more than what Bangladesh has managed to pay. So in that, it was a kind of comparison, right? So there we compare our accounting with that of the other. So it was about a kind of comparison. And even one can say it is the accounting dimension of international transaction, right? So likewise, it is a very practical phenomenon, the international accounting, right? And when it comes to that international accounting, you can apply this for the financial accounting. There can be, universal practices relating to the financial accounting, even the management accounting, the universally adapted practices. So just to say some, if you take that, what do you call, the balance scorecard. So it was a practice which is globally adapted, and there are different performance measurement frameworks, right? The globally adapted ones. So it is international dimension. And audit and assurance, you would find that the auditing standards, right? That is an international phenomenon. The taxation, the same thing applies, even the information systems. So nowadays we talk about what do you call that, the blockchain technologies the most. So that is also the global phenomenon. The data analytics, right? That is also another trend. So likewise, there are different, when it comes to this accounting, it is a very broad area. There can be it is spread uh, all over the accounting subject, right? But here in this course, since we are talking about the contemporary issues in financial reporting, so we'll be looking at the international accounting in a very, very narrow sense. So there we confine our discussion of this international accounting to financial reporting, right? So we are looking at the international accounting relating to financial reporting. So that is our scope. So when it comes to this definition of accounting, as you have explained, you have in fact explained it from different point of view. So the very first definition, if I took, I think out of the three answers, two answers I can relate, or even the all the three answers I can relate to the first level. You talk about universal, or I would say world accounting point of view. So you talk about this international accounting from a universal point of view. So there you have highlighted there are international accounting, international bodies, especially the International Accounting Standards Board. So there they issue the standard, the IFRS, that is applicable for the whole world. And even you can see similar bodies. If you take the latest development in corporate reporting, the integrated reporting, there you have this IIRC, International Accounting, International Integrated Reporting Council. That is also another international body. So they are issuing certain guidelines, the rules, and even the standards, and that is applicable for the whole world. And they are saying that one set of standard for the whole world. So that is a universal kind of thing. Accounting is a universal thing. Then the other level, we can even look at it from international accounting from a company level point of view. Or I would say it is the very narrowest, or I would say the narrowest definition. So if you are to define this international accounting from a very narrow sense, one can say that it is about the international transaction. So, you know, there can be different transactions as I have referred, right? You may be purchasing things from the other countries as a country, or even as a company, you may be carrying out certain transaction with the other countries. So therefore, it is a country level, it is a company level phenomenon. So international transactions you can take, and even you can consider about the parent subsidiary, the parent foreign subsidiary scenario. That is also a company level phenomenon. That is also international accounting, but from a but from a narrow point of view. Or even one can define this international accounting from a comparative point of view, or even it is called the international accounting. So in that, what basically happens, you are looking at the different accounting standards, the guidelines and rules that is applicable for a particular country, right? For example, the accounting standards applicable for a particular country. The accounting standards applicable for Sri Lanka may be compared with the accounting standards that of China. So it is a international accounting. So you're going to compare the accounting practice, the accounting guidelines, accounting standards with that of another country. So it is necessarily a comparison, and it is international. So therefore, you may find that there can be diverse accounting practice. The accounting practice of Sri Lanka can be different from that of China, that of Australia. That is also international accounting. So therefore, when come to this definition of international accounting, you can define it from different levels. You can define it at the universal or the world level, considering the whole world, and then at the bottom, you can compare it from a company level. So it is the narrowest one. And even you can take the second level or the middle level, maybe the comparative accounting. So therefore, this international accounting can be different in different, can be defined in different point of view, right? Now let's take each of these levels and let us discuss that, right? හරි දැන් අපි බලමු මේ එක එක level එක අරගෙන කොහොමද ඒක කැත්තේ මොනවද තියෙන සුවිශේෂී දේවල් කියන එක. So if you are to define this international accounting from a universal or world point of view, as even we said that it is simply, it relates to the standards, guidelines and rules issued by international organization. So their primary premises is that accounting is a universal system. So by taking the primary position, that is accounting is a universal system, they talk about the standards, guidelines and rules issued by the international organization. So the classic example or the more familiar one, that is the IFRS issued by the International Accounting Standards Board. So as I mentioned earlier, there are over 180 countries at the moment has embraced this IFRS, including Sri Lanka. So there are the dominant countries in the world. If you take Australia, if you take even the other dominant nations, maybe the UK, even I think now the India is also there. Those countries are also applying this IFRS, right? So therefore, it is about the universal phenomenon. So it is the standards, guidelines, and rules applicable for the whole world. And also the most recent development, as I mentioned earlier, if you take the international accounting, international, what do you call that? International Integrated Reporting Council, they have issued their framework, the latest one, 2021. So that framework is applicable for the whole world. Even if you take GRI, that is also the Global Reporting Initiative. Now they are issuing GRI standards. That is again applicable for sustainability reporting, and that is also a global body. Even not only that, even you can take the some of the standards guidelines issued by this OECD, the Organization for Economic Development. Likewise, there are certain global bodies who make pronouncement that is applicable for the whole world, right? So as I mentioned in this, their main argument is that accounting is a universal system that can be adopted by the all countries. To a large extent, this has been achieved by the accounting community. As I said, over 180 countries have embraced the IFRS. So therefore, more or less, these practices, the accounting practices would be similar. Yes, then principles and practices would be applicable to all countries. These principles and practices, since it is universal, it is applicable for all the countries. So it is about the highest level of definition of international accounting. Does that make sense? Anything would you like to add? The universal accounting, that is the definition of international accounting from the highest level. Yes, if you are to add something to that, or if you are to get something clarified. Okay, hope that makes sense, right? Okay, then we are moving to the definition of accounting from the narrowest level. So we are going to define it from a very narrow perspective. It is called the company level accounting. It relates to the standard guidelines and practices to account for range of international transactions. So it is about the standards, guidelines, and practices relating to the international transaction. So like the parent subsidiary consolidation. So if you are having a foreign subsidiary, then you need to go for consolidation. So in that, the financial statements of the foreign entity would have to be translated to the reporting currency, right? From the functional currency to reporting currency, then only do the consolidation. So therefore, there are certain accounting standards are there, which is applicable. The consolidation, the IFRS 3, IFRS 10 must be considered. Even the effects of foreign transaction, that is LKS 21. LKS 21 is also applicable. So you need to consider those standards. And also you can think of the foreign currency transaction, simple foreign currency transaction could be there, and also some investment. So it is not up to a subsidiary, but it is less than that. There can be certain foreign investment. So these are some of the examples for company level accounting. Company level accounting. As I said, it is going to be the narrowest focus in international accounting. This definition is very narrow. Company level accounting. And then the middle level, as I mentioned, it is about the comparative or even you can say international accounting. So it is better to use the comparative accounting because we are looking at the different definition of international accounting. So it is about the study of, again, the rules, standards, and guidelines that existed in different countries. As I said, you may compare the accounting practice or the accounting standards applicable to Sri Lanka with that of which is applicable to China. So we are taking more examples from China because now we are quite related, right? They are having a significant interest in our country. So therefore, it makes sense to compare our practices with that of China, right? So one example could be you are going to compare the standards with that of the practices in China, right? This considers the diversity of accounting practices across global and assess the impact of these diverse practices on financial reporting. So therefore, you must find that when come to this comparison, there can be certain differences. The accounting practices could be different. So you may see that remarkable differences if you compare a country from United States. If you take a country from United States, and if you compare that with a country who is adopting IFRS, right? So in that particular situation, if you compare the US with UK, then you may find there are significant differences because in the UK, they are applying the IFRSs, and the USA, they are applying US GAAPs. So then if you take a particular financial statement prepared under two accounting standards, certainly you would find there can be significant difference in the bottom line what you may compute, and even the values of the assets and liabilities. The asset liability values can be significantly different. So අපි එකම යම්කිසි entity එක අපි හිතමු US GAAPs භාවිතා කරලා account financial statements හදනවා කියලා. එතකොට ඒ entity එකටම අපි හැදුවොත් IFRS භාවිතා කරලා අනිවාර්යෙන්ම අපිට එන profit figures දෙක significantly different because they are accounting treatments are different. The recognition, the measurement is different. So therefore, you would certainly find the bottom line are different. Not only that, even the asset liability values could also be the same. So therefore, necessarily, there's a diversity. Diversity is there. And the diversity impact on reporting financial performance and financial position of the company. As I said, it can have a significant impact on the bottom line as well as the position, maybe the economic resources, the assets, and the liability, thereby the net assets, right? Okay, so that is about international accounting. So we have defined it from three different perspectives. So don't be perspectives තුනකින් define කරා මොකක්ද මේ international accounting කියන්නේ කියන එක. The first level, the universal level, then the company level, and the comparative or international level. Right. So that is one of the major learning outcomes what we try to achieve, the definition of international accounting. Yes, would like to ask you, are you clear with that? Yes, I'm looking for feedback. Anything you would like to add or anything that you like to get clarified? Yes. Before we moving on to the other aspect. Right, okay, you're clear with that. Okay, right. Then let us move on to the other aspect. Right, now you know to a certain extent what do you mean by international accounting, right? Now here the main thing what we are going to looking at, yeah, there's a question, okay. The comparative level context, there might be some difficulties in comparison between companies. Okay, yes. In fact, that is what we call the diversity, right? What you're saying that when it comes to this comparative accounting, in the comparison, you say that comparison is difficult. Yes, exactly. So the example even I took, if you consider the US-based entity with that of the UK-based entity, yes, it is certainly different because in UK you are applying the IFRSs, whereas in US you are applying the US gaps. So therefore, when you look at the bottom line, so even if you take a single entity and if you apply these two different standards, certainly the outcome is different. So therefore, that is what we are interested in. So that's why we are saying that we are looking at the diversity. By comparing, we are trying to look at what is the differences, what are the differences, or even the similarities. So therefore, we are looking at the diversity. As you said, the comparison is difficult. Yes, certainly. So that is in fact what we are interested in. ඇත්තටම comparison එකක් අපහසුයි තමයි. ඒක තමයි ඇත්තටම අපි interest වෙන්නේ. අපි බලන්නේ මොනවද මේ තියෙන differences කියලා. Accounting practices වල තියෙන differences. Right? So it is about the comparison. Yes, there can be differences. Right, good. So having discussed this international accounting, now we are coming to the area diversity of international accounting practice. So as I have said that even in the initial part, there can be differences, right? So when there is a difference in these accounting practices, certainly the bottom line, especially the bottom line, what you may record is going to be different. You know, if you take a kind of entity, let's say that entity that is located in Sri Lanka, let's say that. So if they want to get listing in USA, earlier there was a requirement that the financial statement of that entity, they need to convert that to the financial statements that is prepared based on US GAAPs, right? So in Sri Lanka, it is Sri Lankan based entity, they use the IFRS, that is SLFRS and LKS, and they prepare the financial statement. Then if they want to get listing, right, the cross listing in the USA, let's say, for example, so there initially, earlier there was a requirement that you need to convert your financial statements, which is prepared based on US GAAPs. එතකොට අපි cross listing එකක් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා නම් අපි UK stock exchange එක list කරන්න යනවා නම් අපේ entity එක අපි financial statements අපි හදන්න ඕනේ US gaps වලට අනුව. Right? In such an event, certainly you would find that the differences are there. Your performance, the bottom line can be different, and also the asset values, the liabilities, that could be certainly different, right? But later that particular requirement was removed. Even the entities who are getting listed in USA, they have removed such requirement, and they have simply allowed them to go by the IFRS. If they are originally preparing financial statement using this IFRS, they were simply allowed to go by that. But the point is that if you are applying these two different set of accounting standards, certainly there's a difference. So if I'm just to tell you one difference in these accounting standards, when it comes to these US gaps, they do not allow to capitalize the development expenditure, right? So when it comes to the development expenditure, they are not allowed to capitalize that. So their position is that that must be expensed. But if you take the position of IFRS, what is their position? So they are saying that, so if you have research and development expenses, so you can expense, or you need to expense the research one, but the development one you can capitalize, or you need to capitalize if certain conditions are satisfied. So therefore it is certainly a difference. And also when it comes to the measurement can be different. When it comes to financial instrument, the way it is being measured under US gaps can be different from that of IFRS. So therefore, there is a difference. There's a difference under two set of accounting standards. And so that is a very common thing, right? Then at the same time, you know, the whole world is nowadays talking more about the convergence or the harmonization of accounting practices, right? Whether, though it is obvious that there are certain differences, but still the countries are making a kind of, or the international accounting standard setting bodies are trying to achieve a kind of convergence or harmonization of accounting practices. But due to some inherent environmental and even the cultural, or even maybe the regional, religious factors, it was made to a certain extent impossible. So despite the international accounting standard setting bodies are trying to achieve this harmonization, but the environmental factors and the cultural and even the religious factors has made those efforts somewhat impractical. So now let's look at what those factors are. So as I told you earlier, predominantly there can be some environmental factors as well as some cultural factors, including the religion, right? You would find that there can be a remarkable difference depending on different religions. The accounting practice can be shaped by the religion, especially if you take Islamic finance. So their motive is different from that of the Iasb. So the Iasb is indirectly taking a profit motive, but whereas in Islamic finance, they are taking ethical motive. So likewise, even the religion can be the case, but predominantly we are discussing environmental and cultural impacts, right? So let us start with the environmental influences on accounting. So when it comes to accounting practice of a particular country, when it comes to accounting system of a particular country, it can be affected by several factors. So as you would see, it can be affected by the accounting regulation, maybe the tax, the ownership, the legal system, political system. Likewise, there can be different factors which may influence the accounting practice, right? The accounting practice එකක් ගත්තාම යම් කිසි රටක අපි ශ්‍රී ලංකාව කියලා. එතකොට ඒකට affect කරන environmental factors තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපි තව country එකක් ගත්තොත් අපි හිතමු ඉන්දියා වගේ කියලා. එතකොට ඒ country එකටත් specific factors තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ හේතුව එක්ක අපිට අර කියන accounting universal practice එකක් කියන දේ achieve කරගන්න අමාරුයි. නැත්නම් harmonization එකක්, convergence එකක් ඇති කරගන්න අමාරු වෙලා තියෙනවා. What is the purpose role of harmonization accounting in adoption of IFRS? Yes, good question. We'll be certainly discussing them later. Why we are looking for harmonization? So why we are looking for one set of accounting standards for the whole world and one set of accounting practice. ඇයි අපි බලන්නේ මේ එක accounting standard set එකක් එකම විදිහේ accounting practice එකක් ලෝකෙ පුරාම achieve කරන්න. So certainly it has certain benefits. For example, if you think of a multinational company, so if they find that in all of the countries, if they are preparing their financial statement using the IFRS, they find that it is a cost-saving activity. They don't have to take an extra burden in all the countries, so they can prepare the financial statement according to one language. And even if you take the investor's point of view, so if the financial statements being prepared in different countries using the same set of accounting standards, it is necessarily comparable. Then it is quite easy for you to make your investment decision. You can easily compare the financial statement. But in contrast, if different countries have prepared their financial statements using different standards, certainly it will make your life difficult. So therefore, it is quite advantageous, beneficial to the multinational companies, the investors, the financial analysts, and even the accounting profession, right? Accounting profession, or even the certain government agencies. So likewise, there are many beneficiaries of harmonization. Rather than having some diversity, they may prefer harmonization. They may prefer similarities. Okay, good. So we'll be coming to that, but just to give you a quick answer. Okay, so we are discussing about the diversity of accounting practices. So in that, we are coming to the environmental factors. So you would find that the accounting practices of the countries can be different because of these environmental influences. For example, if you take accounting regulation. So if you take, for example, Sri Lanka, you know, when it comes to determining the accounting practice or preparation of financial statement, it is governed by several regulatory requirements. So of course, you need to prepare the financial statement applying this SLFRS and LKS. And at the same time, if you are a kind of listed entity, you need to comply to the requirement of the Companies Act. So it's a regulatory requirement. And at the same time, you might need to comply with the requirement of the stock exchange, maybe the listing requirement. So therefore, that is going to be the accounting regulations applicable for our country. So similarly, if you take another country, they can have their own set of accounting regulation. So if you take China, for example, they can have their own set of accounting regulation. So maybe they are applying the IFRS, right? Still, there can be other requirements. The Companies Act could be different. Even the listing requirements, the stock exchange requirements can be different. So therefore, the accounting practice or the accounting system would be different. So accounting regulation is one thing. And another factor that would contribute for this difference or the diversity, that is the taxation system. So if you take the taxation system, for example, the European context, if you take that German, France, or even the Japan. So in these countries, you would find that the financial reports can be used for the tax purpose. You don't have to prepare a separate set of financial statement for the tax purpose. The financial statement that you have prepared applying the accounting standards is the one you are going to use for the taxation system, for the tax purpose. If that happens, it is quite natural that, especially when it comes to the PP items, so you may be driven by more aggressive depreciation methods. So you would like to pursue the depreciation methods, the different depreciation method, which gives you a higher depreciation, because by way of that you can reduce your tax obligation. So therefore, it is a significant environmental factor. In contrast, if you take another domain, let's say it is Australia, or maybe even Sri Lanka, or even UK, if you take countries as such, we are doing separate uh, statements for tax purpose. So we are preparing financial statement that is for the accounting purposes. For tax purpose, we are preparing a separate set of financial statements. So of course, we are starting with the accounting profit, but then we may be doing certain adjustments based on the tax regulations, and then only we are preparing them. So then in our context, in Australia, in UK, they don't have a motive. When it comes to the accounting, they don't have a motive to have some aggressive depreciation. They are not pursuing aggressive depreciation policies, because uh, they don't find any tax consequences there. But in contrast, when it comes to the preparation of financial statement for the tax purpose, so they have to do that in line with whatever the applicable capital allowances, by applying the capital allowances. So therefore, the tax system and the accounting system is, I would say that it's two different things, right? Whereas in some countries, you would find the taxation system and the accounting that goes hand in hand. It is exactly the same one. So in such an instance, it is pretty obvious that if you're trying to compare the financial statements of France or German with that of Australia or UK, certainly it is not comparable. So that is because of the taxation system. So for this diversity, then the taxation system would account for. Taxation system account for. එතකොට එක් රටවල් වල අපිට පේනවා තියෙන tax systems වෙනස්. එතකොට සමහර රටවල් වල accounting purpose එකට හදන financial statement tax purpose එකටත් භාවිතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් සමහර රටවල් වල මේ දෙකක් accounting සහ tax එක. එතකොට ඒ වගේ අවස්ථාවක අපිට රටවල් compare කරන්න බෑ, accounting system එක different. And similarly, the mode of finance and also the capital markets, that is also going to impact the accounting practice. For example, if you take a country like, say, France, right? If you take a country like France, there you would find the dominant form of finance is going to be the bank finance, right? They are going to depend more on the bank when it comes to the finance. So whereas if you take the USA, in case of USA, so their dominant mode of finance is going to be the share issue. So they depend more on the shareholders. In such an instance, what is the implication that it has on accounting? The mode of finance. So in France, we have seen that they depend on banks, whereas in USA, so they depend on shareholders. Then what is the implication that it has on accounting practice? There's implication. When it comes to shareholders, if you depend on shareholders, certainly you would have to make more disclosures. So they may be interested in more information when it comes to their decision making, when it comes to their resource allocation, decision making, they are interested in more disclosures. So therefore, you need to do more disclosures. So if you take the accounting practice in USA, you would find that they would have done lots of disclosures compared to that of France. So hence, necessarily, the comparability may be compromised. Similarly, if you take the capital markets, when it comes to capital markets, in some countries, they can have some very developed capital markets, whereas we call it the more efficient capital markets, whereas in some countries, you may find that the capital markets are inefficient. In such an instance, again, you may find the disclosures can be different, right? So the accounting system got influenced. So similarly, if you take the political system, certainly it would manifest in all the systems in a country. So if you see the political system of a country is corrupted, then certainly it is manifested everywhere, doesn't it? So if you take the classic example, if you take what we are experiencing today is something as such. So the political system, it is corrupted, then it is manifested in whatever the system what we have, including accounting. So if the government is more accountable, more transparent, if the political system is more transparent and accountable, you may find that when it comes to the accounting, there is a tendency that they are doing some extensive disclosures. So they are disclosing information extensively. So it is a reflection of the political system. So whereas if you find a country, they are not accountable and they are more, they are not transparent. So then as a result of that, accounting system would also make some very limited amount of disclosure. Even the measurement aspect can also be influenced, right? Then the economic growth and development, that is also another crucial factor. So this was especially the case, when it comes to China, China was predominantly an agricultural country. So when they are moved from this agriculture to a more manufacturing based economy, so it had some implication on the accounting system. Especially, they have to revisit the accounting for leases. So their lease accounting, they had to focus much attention. So when they are moving to an industrial world from an agricultural based economy to an industrial based economy. So it makes implication to the accounting system. Similarly, if you get this ownership, that is same. So if you take the US based entity, so most of the time you would find the entities are owned by the shareholders. So whereas in German or in France or even in Japan, you would find in those countries, there is a government ownership, even in the China. So the government ownership of the entities. So this again have some implication on accounting practice. What could be that? If the entities are owned by the shareholders, you might need to make more disclosures. More disclosures would be preferred. Whereas if it is owned by the kind of government, then the disclosure requirement can be different. The orientation could be different. Even if it is owned by the family, right? The family ownership is there. Yes, again, the disclosures can be different. Similarly, if you take the legal system, that is also a factor that would affect the accounting system. So, when come to the well, there are basically two dominant laws. So there are some common law countries, whereas there are some, what do you call that, the civil law countries, right? If I'm not mistaken, yeah, common law and the civil law. When it comes to the common law countries, they believe more in the case law, right? The interpretation made by the court. Whereas if you take a civil law country, like the France, German, those are what we call the non-English speaking, the civil law countries. In those countries, they believe much in the statute law. So they believe much in regulation, right? Whatever the things that is codified law. That also have some implication. So the one particular implication is that when come to the civil law countries, you would find that there is a strong corporate law. There is a strong corporation law can be witnessed compared to the common law countries. And also when it comes to the common law countries, you would find that most of the time accounting is taken care by the professional accounting bodies. They are non-legislative bodies, right? You would find that could have been the situation. You take countries like the UK, it is a kind of common law country. There they find that the accounting is more or less influenced by the professional accounting bodies. So whereas the France, German, or even the Japan, the countries like this, you may find those countries would be having all these accounting practices are governed by the accounting regulation. So that is passed in the legislation, that is passed by the legislator. So it is going to control the accounting systems. So likewise, the legal systems could have certain implication on the accounting system. So these are some environmental factors. Even the accounting profession can have implication on accounting systems. So if you take uh, the countries where the accounting is managed by the non-legislative professional accounting bodies, they are taking, I would say that more principle-based approach, for accounting. Whereas if you take the countries where they believe in legislation, right, there are more regulation can govern the accounting systems or accounting practices. So likewise, the accounting profession could also have some implication on the accounting practice or the system. So likewise, these are some of the factors. There can be several. So the main point, what I was trying to explain or elaborate, these environmental factors uh, can influence the accounting system of a country. Thereby, it can create a diversification of the accounting practice of different countries. So though the international bodies are trying to achieve the harmonization, that harmonization projects uh, has been, I would say that discouraged. This harmonization projects have been discouraged by these environmental factors, which means a difference in the accounting practices. එතකොට ලෝකයේ උත්සාහ කරත් සමහර international accounting international bodies accounting bodies වෙන්න පුළුවන් එයාලා උත්සාහ කරත් harmonization එකට යන්න මේ environmental factors එක බැරි වෙලා තියෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? Okay, so that is about the environmental influence, right? Before we move on to the culture, yes, would like to ask you whether you are clear with that, anything that you would like to add or anything you would like to clarify. Yes. So there can be other factors. So you can even think of those factors, or even, yeah, you can add something to this discussion, or anything that you're not clear, rather than just making it delivered one way. So I went on explaining that. So instead of that, making it more interactive, you can add something to that. So are you clear with what I have told you so far? Yeah, I'm waiting for a feedback. Yeah. Right. Okay. You're fine with that, no? Right. Now we are moving on to the other major factor which would create a kind of difference in accounting practices. Right. What is that? So that is going to be the culture. So like the environmental factors, the culture is also playing a crucial role in this diversity of accounting practices. The culture would necessarily make the accounting practices of the countries are different. The accounting practices of the countries are diverse. The culture maybe when come to the Asian context, they may be having a particular culture which may be different from that of the Western world. So therefore, it is a very obvious one. So because of that, this culture can have implication on the accounting practice. And as a result of that, accounting practices may not be comparable, or they can be diverse. Then what do you mean by culture? So simply, If you take organization, there's a particular culture. If you take a family, there's a particular culture. Even if you take a country, there can be a particular culture. So therefore, the culture can be there at different levels. The culture can be witnessed in different levels. It can be witnessed in the society level, and even it could be witnessed in the organization level, or even it could be witnessed in a more individual level. So therefore, culture is everywhere. Culture is everywhere. So from just to say that, what do you mean by culture? It is simply the values, beliefs, norms, right? So particular definition was given in 1987. It was a comprehensive one. It says culture is an expression of norms, values, and customs which reflect the typical behavioral characteristic, right? So it reflects the values, norms, and the customs which will be helpful in explaining the uh, behavioral patterns, right? The term culture is reserved for societies as a whole or nation, and subcultures is used for the level of an organization, profession, or even family. As I mentioned, this can be witnessed at different levels. So here, initially, what we are trying to do, we are going to see the cultural dimension that is applicable for a particular country, right? So, there was a remarkable study that was done by the Hofstede. He has tried to classify the countries. He has tried to classify the countries based on 4 dimensions. So later he had another dimension that was the short-term and long-term orientation. But initially, in his initial work, he identified 4 main dimensions. So it is called the individualism versus collectivism, the large versus small power distance, strong versus weak, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity versus femininity, right? So taking these 4 dimensions, the Hofstede has managed to distinguish the different countries. For example, if you take Sri Lanka, you can put it in a particular place. Taking these 4 dimensions, you can position them in a particular place. If you take, say, German, you can place them in a particular place. Likewise, you can distinguish the countries based on these 4 dimensions. So therefore, it was one of the remarkable studies that has happened in the cultural arena. In the cultural arena, that was one of the remarkable one. Then what is their relevance to us? So yes, it is a country phenomenon. It's a country-based phenomenon. Then what is their relevance to us? So we are interested in the accounting practice. Based on this Hofstede seminal work, the Gray, sometime later, he has tried to derive some accounting values based on these 4 dimensions, which is helpful to distinguish countries based on the culture. Based on these dimensions, later he has identified certain accounting values, so which can be used to distinguish the accounting practices of different countries. තොට මේ හොෆ්ස්ටෙඩ්ගේ ස්ටඩි එක අපිට කොහොමද වැදගත් වෙන්නේ? හොෆ්ස්ටෙඩ්ගේ ස්ටඩි එක බේස් කරලා පසු කාලීනව ග්‍රේ විසින් ඩිවෙලොප් කරනවා accounting values. ඒ accounting values අපිට උදව් වෙනවා accounting practices distinguish කරන්න. So therefore, if you are to see what is the relationship between these societal values and the accounting values, the societal values would help you to distinguish the countries depending on the culture, and these societal values then influence, based on the societal values, the accounting values have been derived. Accounting values have been derived, which helps to distinguish the accounting practice from country to country, right? So let us look at each of these societal values and then come to the accounting values. Starting from the first dimension, individualism versus collectivism. When come to the countries can be characterized as the individualistic focused countries versus collectivism focused countries. So in the individualism countries, what happens is that uh, the members, they are taking care of themselves as well as their immediate family. So maybe if it is a husband, he is taking care of the wife and also the children. So that is how these individualistic focused countries are characterized. So they believe in very the close, I would say that very loose social relationship. So they believes in very loose social relationship. They are focusing much on the immediate family. So they take care of themselves as well as their uh, immediate families. If you take countries like most of the time the Western countries, in the Western countries, we have seen this phenomenon. They are not much into this what you call the collectivism, rather than they are more into this individualism. So in contrast, if you take the Asian countries, they are predominantly collectivism based countries. So we'll see what is collectivism. In the collectivism, yes, they are not take care of themselves and their immediate family members, even that extend beyond that, they take care of their relatives and clan. So they take care of their friends, they take care of their relatives, they look after each other. So that is especially the case now. So if you look at teledrama in India, you may find that if you take a particular house, right? So there are several families are there, and that is typically a cultural aspect, right? It is typical cultural aspect. So therefore, when come to the Asian countries, it is predominantly, I think they are more towards collectivism. Whereas the Western world, they are more into that individualism. But at the same time, we can argue that even in a particular country, even within a particular country, there can be different communities, maybe the urban community and also the non-urban community. They can be different in terms of their orientation. So according to uh, according to what I believe, I think the urban communities, they are more towards the individualism. So whereas the non-urban community, they are more towards the collectivism. So if you go to, uh, I would say that your village, you may find the scenario if you are outside Colombo, right? If you're outside Colombo, if you go to your village, you will certainly see that they are more uh, about the family relationships, the relatives, the clan, they are taking care of each other. Whereas in the uh, urban community, we may find that it is more towards individualism. Right. Then if I ask you, in Sri Lanka, where you can put Sri Lanka? Is it an individualism-based country or a collectivism-based country, according to your thinking?
Collectivism, sir.
It is collectivism. It is more toward collectivism. No? Again, what do you think when come to this urban community and the non-urban community? Do you see is it still the collectivism or you would find it different? What do you think? But in urban areas, the case is different. Yeah. So yes, it is more predominantly. Yes, I'm also in the same viewpoint. I think we are a collectivism-based country, but in the urban societies, even there can be several other factors which has certainly created because the working community, they have placed, uh, they had to place in these urban areas. So therefore, all what they can take care of maybe their immediate family members. So they are settling there, which is different from their hometown, right? So in that, they have to be individualistic. So depending on the working conditions. So otherwise, yes, Sri Lanka is predominantly a collectivism-based country. So that is the phenomenon applicable for the Asian region, right? Okay. So that is the first dimension what we can think of. Then the second dimension, it is about the power distance, how comfortable you are with the power distance. So in terms of this power distance, again, we can divide the community into two, that is large power distance societies versus small power distance societies. So when it comes to the large power distance societies, you believe in hierarchy. You believe in power hierarchy, and you understand that there's a particular point, there's a particular place for you in that hierarchy, and you accept the power differences, right? So in our community, for example, we know, so knowingly or unknowingly, we assume that the politicians are more powerful. So that is the primary position. So we are taking that stance, right? So that is what our belief. So we accept that there's a hierarchy in power. There are more powerful ones and the less powerful ones. Even for whatever the institution you may take, whatever the organization you take, that is there. Even if you take the academia, we assume that we have the heads of department, then we have the senior lecturers, then the junior lecturers, likewise. Even in your working organization, the CEOs can be there, then the next level managers and these lower level managers, likewise, the hierarchies are there, right? It is about the large power distance societies. In the large power distance societies, we accept that there's a hierarchical order and everyone has a place in that. Whereas in small power distance societies, so they strive for power equalization. So they look for the equality. They do not tolerate the power differences. So they question, right? So they need to have a justification for the power differences. Why there can be a difference? Otherwise, everyone is equal. So that's why we may see that even in the these dominant countries, right? So if you take UK, USA, in these countries, even symbolically, when it comes to this vaccination program, even the politicians are keeping in the line and they are taking their vaccine when the time comes. But whereas in country like Sri Lanka, when we are going to take the vaccine, so that has to be done according to a list given by the politician, right? So that is the situation of the developing countries. But the developed countries, it is different, at least symbolically, right? So sometimes that may not be the case, but still we would find that that is there, right? Right. Again, if I ask you, yes, Sri Lanka, where are you going to put that? Is it a small power distance society or is it a large power distance society? What is that? Sri Lanka? Yeah, it is obvious one. What do you think? It is obviously large power distance.
Large power.
Yeah, very correct. Yeah, it's a large power distance society. So that is the second characteristic what the Hofstede has used to explain the society. Right. Similarly, if you take the third dimension, it is about the uncertainty avoidance. So here the fundamental question is that how comfortable you are with the uncertainty. To what extent that you want to control your future. Are you comfortable with the uncertainty or you are not comfortable? That's it. So depending on this dimension, you can divide the countries as the strong uncertainty avoidance societies and weak uncertainty avoidance societies. So if you take the strong uncertainty avoidance societies, what they are doing, they maintain rigid codes of belief and behavior and are not and are intolerant towards the deviant person and ideas. So you believe in rules. You believe in rules and regulation the most. So you want to avoid the uncertainty. You do whatever it takes to control the future. Whatever it takes to control the future. Whereas in weak uncertainty avoidance societies, they are quite relaxed, right? They maintain a more relaxed atmosphere. So where the practices count more than principles and deviation is more easily tolerated. You are not going to worry about that. You don't believe in rules and rigid practices. So instead, you believe in principles, right? You are quite relaxed, right? You don't worry about the future. You don't try to control that. You simply uh, go by the approach, the weak uncertainty avoidance, right? You are more tolerate towards the uncertainty, right? So that is the situation of the weak uncertainty avoidance society. So if you take a country like Sri Lanka, so where we can place in these two,
Weak uncertainty.
it is going to be
Weak uncertainty avoidance.
weak uncertainty, strong uncertainty. Yeah, yeah. There's a divided opinion. Some says that strong uncertainty, and some says that weak uncertainty. Right? Can you justify your position?
Japan is the strong uncertainty avoidance.
Sorry.
The country Japan is the strong uncertainty avoidance.
If you take a country like Japan, in that you mean that they believe more in these rules, regulation. They are intolerant towards this deviant person and ideas, no?
Yes.
Yeah, they want to control the future. Okay, good. So if you apply that situation to Sri Lanka, what is that?
Yeah, compared with the Japan and Sri Lanka, that type of aspects are
We are ignorant, isn't it?
very low scale. That's why.
Yeah. So yeah, in fact, even I do agree to a large extent, because we are quite ignorant, I would say. Even if you look at the instances we have went in the history, for example, if you take this COVID pandemic, it's a classic example, no? So the first wave came, uh, so somehow we have managed, then we become complacent, and we, even the president of the country has gone into making the statement that "Api tamai hondatama kare," right? Then you were quite complacent, and the second wave comes, okay, damaged somewhat, but still you manage to celebrate the new year, right? We celebrated, including us, right? So because we are
Other one
part of
is,
that community,
one
even
is the
myself,
Arnaikas.
we have celebrated the new year to the fullest. But right after the new year, see what we are going through. So now we feel that if we had some good controls during that time, certainly we may not experience something similar to that. So in that sense, we are quite ignorant nation. So we have weak uncertainty avoidance. Even if you take that the attack, what we had experienced, that was what you call the uh, in April. And what was that? That the unfortunate incident. So the bomb blast. So that is also a classic example. Even there were warnings. It was said that there was 90,
Tuesday
yeah,
attacks.
Tuesday attack, no? 97 times or something. That much of times warnings were given, but everyone, none of them have considered. The president managed to sleep by 10 o'clock. So that was the situation what we experienced under the previous government. So therefore, no one is doing their best, I think.
And another one is the Arnayaka disaster.
Sorry.
Arnayaka district, that is earthquake.
Earthquake. Even at that time, also their uh, uh, behavior was similar, no?
The
They,
geographical department has not given the enough information for the publics. Those were a lot of
yeah.
people were destroyed.
Even the most recent one, that whatever the ship. So what we experienced, the blast.
Yeah, the pearl ship.
Yeah, that was the same. No, so therefore we have to agree that we are a weak uncertainty avoidance society. Yeah, right. Good. Then moving on to the final dimension, it is about the masculinity versus femininity. So in the masculinity community, you are more towards the achievements, the heroism, right? You are more towards the achievement, the material success, and also the assertiveness. You are going by the achievement. So you are more oriented towards your objectives, You are taking the commitment, you are, I would say, more dedicated. So it is a kind of masculinity traits are dominant. So whereas in the countries which is characterized by this femininity, they would experience that in contrast to this achievement orientation, they are more oriented towards caring for others, caring for the weak, and the quality of life, the modesty. So likewise, a typical uh, characteristics what we can see from a woman. So but the masculinity, you would find that it is the typical characteristic what we can see from the gentlemen, right? So that is the situation. Yes, again, if I ask you, in Sri Lanka, where we can put, are we a kind of achievement oriented or masculinity trade based country, or is it a femininity trade based country? Are we caring for the others? Are we looking uh, for the weak? Or what is our position? More towards, yes, I find that in most of the instances we are having a combination, but out of that, what is the more dominant one? It's a mixed scenario, yeah. Even I do agree, it's a mixed scenario, and even the femininity, right? Femininity, yeah. Even out of the two, and we are caring more for the weak, because if you look at the previous instances, you have seen that whatever the hard times that the country is going through, whatever the hard times the country is going through, the people are voluntarily coming to support. So even if the one area of the people, if they have experienced a flood or tsunami or whatever that, as a country, what we are doing, so we are collecting, we are donating, no? We are making lots of donations, and we trying to help each others out. So therefore, even based on that, the religious foundation might have led us to go for more towards femininity. But at the same time, we have that mentality that අපේ තමයි හොඳම එක, අපේ තමයි ලොකුම එක, ඒ කියන mentality එකත් අඩු වැඩි වශයෙන් තියෙනවා. If you take that, whatever the construction we are taking, so we want to be the best one, the nelum kuluna, nelum pokuna. So likewise, even we have that particular mentality as well, no? The boasting mentality is also there, no? අපි තමයි හොඳටම කරේ, the most recent one, right? That was even there. So therefore, it is necessarily mixed, but no, when war was won, the society was towards the masculinity. When it comes to disasters, yeah, you are making that it is based on what you call that, it is a contingent. It's a contingent one, and it's contingent on the times that society is going through. So it is very good explanation. Huh? I really like that. In fact, in his own analysis, the Hofstede has also mentioned that these cultural values can be changed over time. So therefore, you have very correctly captured that. So at the time when we were going through that war, we were in that masculinity mentality. Yes. When it comes to disasters, yes, we are into the femininity. Based on the scenario, situation change. Yes, you are very correct. I do agree. So it's a very good explanation. So as Hofstede has mentioned, that the social values can be changed over time. Yes, depending on the situation, it can be different. Good. Very correct. Nice explanation. Okay, so it is about this societal values. Okay, now we have almost done this activity. So now it is 5 o'clock. So shall we go for a break and continue? We discuss for a long time, no? A break continue. Okay, then shall we break for 15 minutes? Now it is almost 5. Then shall we meet around 15 minutes past 5 and continue with the rest of the lecture, right? Okay, have a break and come back. Right. So we've been discussing about what do you call that, the cultural factors which make the accounting, yeah, which make the accounting practice different from country to country. So in that discussion, first we start with the culture that is applicable for a particular country. So using the Hofstede 4 dimensions, we have managed to classify uh, even the Sri Lankan situation. So we could locate where we stand. So now we are moving on to the accounting values that was developed by Gray. And as I told you earlier, when it comes to these accounting values were derived based on the Hofstede original work. Based on the Hofstede work, uh, in order to explain the differences in the accounting practice, the Gray has managed to derive these accounting values. So later, we are discussing the relationship between these cultural values and the accounting values. Now, let us look at these accounting values, right? The first one, we call it the professionalism versus statutory control. In the professionalism, basically, there is a preference for the individual professional judgment and professional self-regulation. The accounting community, the accounting practices, where it believes in professionalism, they look for professional judgment. They need more space for professional judgment and professional self-regulation. Whereas the accounting practices, which believes in statutory control, so they need more prescriptions. So they believe in the legal requirement, statutory control. They are more towards the compliance-based approach. So the compliance to the legal requirement. So when it comes to certain countries, you may find, especially if you take the countries who are adopting the IFRSs, so these countries are more towards the professionalism. Especially if you take countries like Australia, if you take countries like UK, in these countries, they believe in principle-based approach. In contrast, if you take a country like USA, in USA, US GAPS, we call it, it is a rule-based approach. So they are more towards the statutory control in that sense, right? So therefore, there can be countries which you can place them in professionalism versus statutory control. Then the second one, it is about the uniformity versus flexibility. So there may be some accounting practices who believe in uniformity over the flexibility. Whereas some accounting practices, they may look for more flexibility. So what is this uniformity? A preference for enforcement of uniform accounting practices between companies. So irrespective of the individual circumstances, you are not going to consider about that, but you are going to achieve the uniformity across the entities, right? So there you believe in uniformity in the accounting practices. Irrespective of the individual circumstances of these companies, you know, the companies from different industries could be different, but still you would like to see some uniformity across these companies representing different industries. Whereas a country which may, or accounting practice which may believe in flexibility, they are considering about the what do you call that, individual circumstances and the individual company scenario, and they allow some room for flexibility, right? They allow some room for flexibility depending on the situation, depending on the company scenario, uh, the accounting rules. They can accept there can be differences in the policies, right? uh, so whatever the principles that they are applying, whatever the measurement basis that they are using, right, they can make some compromise. But in uniformity, no, they want to see the uniformity is maintained at any cost. Then the other interesting dimension, it is called the conservatism versus optimism. So there are some countries, there are some accounting practices, they are taking more conservative approach, the conservative approach to measurement. For example, they may prefer the measurement, maybe the historical cost-based measurement. So, compared to the fair value, it is historical cost is a what you call it is more towards a conservatism. It's a conservative approach. And even when it comes to the recognizing the income and expenses, you are taking a prudence-based conservative approach. Whereas in optimism, so the countries who believe in optimism, they are more towards a risk-taking approach. They are taking the laissez-faire, the risk-taking approach. So it is market-oriented risk-taking approach. Those are the countries who believe in the fair value-based measurement. So maybe the developed countries, they may prefer the optimism. If you take country like USA, so they would believe in optimism. They would believe in market. Whereas if you take country like, say, Japan or something, or even China, so they are more towards this conservatism. So they would consider that. And then the final one, it is about secrecy versus transparency. Secrecy versus transparency. There can be some countries who would consider about disclosing the information only to the parties who are involving in the management and financing, right? The members who are representing the management, members who are representing the finance providers, yes, they would like to make disclosures for the benefit of those parties. So therefore, they are taking a very confidentiality approach to disclosures. Whereas there can be certain countries who who prefer to be more transparent, or they are more publicly accountable, and they are taking an open approach. So if you take countries with, say, with the efficient capital market, in those countries, yes, they believe in more disclosures. They need to be transparent. So like USA, so we believe that they have a strong capital market, efficient one, then they are taking a transparent approach. So whereas if you take country like China or Japan, they are more towards the secrecy. Even France or German, so those countries, they believe in when it comes to the financing, they believe in banks. So in that instance, they are taking an approach to make disclosures only for the benefit of those finance providers or those who are involved with the management. So therefore, it's a confidential aspect. So out of these four values, if I'm to say that the two dominant values is going to be the last two, the conservatism versus optimism. So that particular dimension is particularly applicable for the measurement. So අපි දන්නවා conservatism versus optimism මේ කියන principle එක measurement aspect එකට තමයි ගොඩක්ම අදාළ වෙන්නේ. So conservatism, a conservative approach to measurement. So if you take the last dimension, it is about the disclosures. So the secrecy versus transparency කියන්නේ ඒක ගොඩක්ම අදාළ වෙන්නේ disclosures වලට. So out of these four dimensions, the most crucial dimensions, if I'm to say, that is going to be the third and the fourth one. It's conservatism versus optimism and the secrecy versus transparency. So that is the two most important one. But apart from that, yes, even the professionalism versus statutory control, uniformity versus flexibility, yes, that is there. Okay, let us try to place Sri Lanka according to these accounting values. So what do you think in Sri Lanka, the professionalism versus statutory control? So what do you find? Are we more towards professionalism or statutory control when it comes to the accounting practice? So in professionalism, you believe in professional judgment and professional self-regulation. So whereas The statutory control, it was about the legislative controls. In account in Sri Lanka, statutory. Okay, good effort. Right, appreciate your effort. Just to clarify, when it comes to the accounting profession in Sri Lanka, it is largely taken care by the uh, Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. In the sense, we have a professional accounting body. So he is the one who's taking the main control. So in the statutory control, basically how it happens is that it is the rules and whatever the rules and the prescription made by the legislation is what control the accounting profession. But in Sri Lanka, we find that we have a strong professional accounting body, and it is an independent body, and that is what take care of the accounting practice. And also in Sri Lanka we have IFRS. So IFRS, that is a principle based one. So hence, given these two dominant characteristics, the presence of the professional accounting body and the presence of IFRS, it has made the Sri Lanka more towards professionalism. Statutory control, in the sense everything is taken care by the legislation. The legislator passed the regulation. Accounting regulation is passed in the legislation, and thereby the control is carried out. But Sri Lanka, that is not the case. The accounting profession is governed by the professional accounting body, right? So depending on that, we can place it. We are more into statutory controls are there, but we are more into professionalism, right? Okay, then uniformity versus flexibility. What do you think? Are we in favor of this uniformity or is it flexibility? What is the situation in Sri Lanka? Are we, if you look at the accounting practice, is it more towards the uniformity?
Uniformity.
Uniformity. So we would like to see, we are not attending to individual circumstances of the entities. Instead, we try to achieve uniformity across the companies. So that's what we are more into. Yeah, we need to see that. Yeah. Uniformity and comparability are two different things, right? In comparability, we say uh, that like things look alike and different things look different. Yes, to a certain extent, the accounting standards would govern us for us to be uniform in our accounting practices. But at the same time, I do feel that even we have some flexibility, even by nature of, if you take the accounting standards, we have the principle-based accounting standards. So it is not the rule-based one. So in the presence of the rule-based, the what do you call that? The principle-based approach, it must facilitate the flexible approach. Whereas if you have a rule-based approach, that is where you take the approach uh, either comply or explain basis. So in such an instance is where we see the uniformity in most of the time, but given the principle-based nature of the accounting standards, to a certain degree, the flexibility would also be there. So, when come to the accounting policies especially, so the choice is always there. So even you can change the accounting policies given that if you find you can provide more reliable and more relevant information, so you are given the option to deviate from the existing accounting principles. So to a certain extent, the flexibility would also be there. So therefore, it is a kind of mixed scenario. Mixed scenario, we could say that, no? ලංකාවේ අපි නිකන් mixed scenario එකක් වගේ තමයි තියෙන්නේ. Complete uniformity කියන්න බෑ. Flexibility එකත් යම් මට්ටමකට තියෙනවානේ. Considering given the nature of the accounting standards what we are adapting, right? Okay. Then the conservatism versus optimism. What we are towards? Are we more conservative or are we more optimistic? So we are predominantly what kind of measurement we are going by in most of the time. Like, are we driven by the historical cost-based measurement or are we more towards the fair value-based measurement? What kind of measurements you would see predominantly in a country like Sri Lanka? Yeah, just an idea. Yeah, you can add. So that's perfect. So as I feel, you know, when you come to a country like Sri Lanka, we don't have the advanced market. The only instance where we have a market which we can generate the fair value based on the market inputs or the level 1 inputs, that is the share market. So therefore, depending on the economic development of the country, it has influenced us to be more conservative. So hence, I believe we are more towards the conservatism so far. Yeah, conservative, no? Good. Then secrecy versus transparency. So when it comes to that particular dimension, so are we transparent or are we concentrate our disclosures to particular party, the ones who finance or ones who involved in the management? What is the situation in Sri Lanka? So if you take the Sri Lankan situation, are we secrecy? Okay. So why do you think so? We are more towards secrecy. So for me, I feel that Sri Lanka, to a large extent, we believe in transparency. In the sense, you know, when it comes to the reporting, when it comes to the public listed entity, they all come up with an annual report. And if you look at the disclosures, what they have made, I feel that extensive disclosures they have made. So if you take the annual reports, you may find that the extensive sort of disclosures are there. So, and again, it is towards the shareholders. It's more towards the shareholders. So hence, you are not just restricting to the ones who is financing or the management, but in contrast, you are going beyond. So you are making the information publicly available. So in that sense, I feel that Sri Lanka is somewhat transparent, or to a large extent, we can say it is a country that is transparent. So that is my opinion, but it can be different. So you can have argument, right? None of these things are perfect answers, I would say. It just based on your experience and your justification, right? And it is even not good to mention or to make the argument without having the support from the reliable sources, but just we are making certain points and we are using so our judgment, right? It is our judgment, but that is not conclusive, I would say. It is a judgment. It is your own agency, right? We need to again at the same time acknowledge that. So මේවා කොතනකවත් අපිට perfectly කියන්න බෑ. හේතුව මොකද මේවා අපිට literature වලින් support එක තියෙන එහෙම solid arguments නෙමෙයි. මේක අපිට තියෙන අපේ judgment එක. ඒක අපේ agency එක තමයි භාවිතා කරලා හිතන්නේ. නිසා you can you can take a particular position and then you can argue based on that, right? It is not conclusive. So that's the point. Okay, good. Then let us move on to this is an important slide, I must say that. So initially we discussed about the cultural values. There we could distinguish the countries based on the 4 dimensions: the power distance, the avoidance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, and masculinity. Then thereafter we discuss about the counting values, which is derived from the Hofstede original work. The Gray has accomplished that. The Gray has managed to identify the professionalism, uniformity, conservatism, and secrecy. So considering the research that had been carried out in this context, they have managed to found this kind of relationship between these cultural values and accounting values. So if you look at the professionalism, uh, the low power distance, low uncertainty avoidance, and high individualism is linked or related or associated with the professionalism. So this is how you must read it, right? The first one, you can see that it is a low power distance, low uncertainty avoidance, and high individualism is associated with the professionalism. So in the countries, if you take a particular accounting practice is more towards the professionalism, in those countries, if you look at the cultural dimension, it is like this. It is low power distance country, and it is uncertainty avoidance, low uncertainty avoidance scenario, and also they are high individualistic countries, right? They are more focused on the high individualism. So those aspects are linked with the professionalism. Similarly, if you take the uniformity, the high power distance countries, high uncertainty avoidance countries, and low individualistic countries associated with the uniformity. So in the countries, the accounting profession, if you see the uniformity in contrast to the flexibility, those countries, if you look at the country situation, the power distance, uncertainty avoidance, and individuals. So it is uniformity. Then again, when it comes to conservatism, the high uncertainty avoidance, low individualism, low masculinity is resulted in conservatism. Similarly, when it comes to secrecy, the high power distance, high uncertainty avoidance, low individualism, and low masculinity is associated with secrecy. So this is the situation, right? Then if we try to place Sri Lanka, let us see what kind of characteristics that we can see. Power distance in Sri Lanka, what do you see? We have a high power distance, no? We have a high power distance. Okay. Then uncertainty avoidance. In our case, we say that it is a minus. It is a low uncertainty avoidance, no? And individualism, that is low. Then according to that, we can see 2 characteristics as per this relationship. So we are supposed to be uniform. We are supposed to be uniform, but this may not be the case, but it's a kind of prediction. Nah? This is a prediction. The Lanka situation එක ගත්තොත් මෙතන characteristics දෙකක් තියෙනවානේ. Power distance එක high, uncertainty avoidance අපි low. එතකොට individualism අපි ඒක low. එතකොට මෙතන තියෙන characteristic දෙකක් present වෙනවා. ඒ අනුව බැලුවොත් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපේ accounting practice එක uniform practice එකක් වෙන්න ඕනේ. Right? Yes, to a certain extent, as you even mentioned, yes, some uniformity is there. ඒ වගේම බැලුවොත් power distance එක high, ඊට පස්සේ uncertainty avoidance එක හැබැයි අපි low, individualism low, and masculinity in our country more towards it is less. එහෙනම් අපි secrecy තමයි වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට නමුත් අපි transparent කිව්වා. ඒතකොට සමහරව මේක secrecy කිව්වා. එතකොට මේ වගේ දෙයක් තමයි අපි predict කරන්නේ. එතකොට මෙතන මේ කියන ඔරිජිනල් වර්ක් එකේ තියෙන වැදගත්කම තමයි අපිට පුළුවන් accounting practices එක එක countries වල predict කරන්න මේක base කරලා to a certain extent. So it may not be correct at all, but this is what they have empirically witnessed. So this kind of relationship is what they have empirically observed. But this study would have conducted some time ago, or considering the several studies that was carried out in a period of time. So as we agreed that the values can be changed over time, so things would have been different, but still this was a kind of work to a certain extent we can use to predict the accounting practices. Accounting practices අපිට යම් මට්ටමකට predict කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ කියන dimensions භාවිතා කරලා. Right? Okay. Then putting that, looking at this relationship, you know, the accounting values would determine, societal values would determine the accounting values. There's a relationship as we witnessed, and then that is in turn decide the accounting practice. So as I told you earlier, when it comes to this measurement and disclosure, it is determined by the conservatism and the secrecy. To a large extent, it is decided by the conservatism and the secrecy. But අපි කලින් කතා කරා මේ measurement සහ disclosure කියන එක ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් තීරණය වෙන accounting values දෙක conservatism සහ secrecy කියන එක. නේ? ඒ වගේම තමයි authority and enforcement කියන එක decide වෙන factors දෙක තමයි professionalism and uniformity කියන්නේ. එතකොට in a country like Sri Lanka, I told you that we are more towards professionalism in the sense that we have the independent professional accounting body. In fact, we have two professional accounting bodies, and also we have the Ifrs we have adopted, and depending on that, when it comes to this authority and enforcement, we see in Sri Lanka the party or the body which has the power to adopt accounting standard, it is going to be the Institute of Chartered Accountant of Sri Lanka. So therefore, that is through a professional accounting body. So hence in Sri Lanka, it is not the legislature controls the accounting practice, but it is the professional accounting body. It is because Sri Lanka we have the professionalism the most. And the uniformity, yes, we are to a certain extent we are towards uniformity, and even the flexibility is there in countries where you have the uniformity the most. It takes a rule-based approach. In the instances where you adopt the accounting standard which is principle-based, again it is a not the legislative control, but it is a non-legislative control can be witnessed in the accounting practice. And when it comes to these accounting values, it is determined by the societal value. And that is what we explained earlier. For example, if you take the professionalism, how the cultural values linked to that, you can say the low power distance, uncertainty avoidance, low uncertainty avoidance, and high individualism is linked to the professionalism. So මෙතන තියෙන ලක්ෂණ වලින් මම දැන් තුනක් professionalism එක link වෙනවා මේ relationship එක බලපුවාම. ඒ වගේම අපි ගත්ත uniformity එකත් ඒ විදිහටම power distance, uncertainty, individualism මේ කියන දේවල් influence වෙනවා. මම conservatism ගත්තාම අපිට පේනවා එතනත් 3 factors contribute කරනවා. ඒ වගේම secrecy ගත්තාම මේ factors හතරම contribute කරනවා. එතන මේක කොහොමද අපි read කරගන්නේ? Societal values influence කරනවා accounting values වලට. එතකොට වැදගත්ම aspect එකක් කියලා මම කිව්වා measurement disclosure. මොකද accounting profession එකට accounting practice එකට ආවහම අපි financial statements වල ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් තියෙන measurement සහ disclosures. එතකොට ඒක mainly determined by the conservatism and secrecy. And then how the accounting practice is governed, that is depend on the professionalism and uniformity. So in our case, I told you that we have a professional accounting body and the IFRS, which is principle based. So therefore, the authority is having by the Institute of Chartered Accountant of Sri Lanka. Whereas in other countries, the legislation is controlling the governing the accounting practice. But in Sri Lanka, that is a bit different. So we have a strong professional accounting body. So ලංකාවේ තත්ත්වය ගත්තොත් අපේ authority සහ enforcement සිද්ධ කරන්නේ professional accounting body එකක්. නමුත් සමහර රටවල, if you take German, if you take France, in those countries, it is done by the legislature. Okay, right. Does that make sense? This is particularly important. There's a higher chance that you would be tested on this. So even in the last time, we tested on this. So therefore, this is something particularly important. So I would want you to put more emphasis on that. And I believe that there can be some questions. Better to come up with these questions, then we can get them clarified. මම හිතන ප්‍රශ්න තියෙන්න පුළුවන් සමහර විට එහෙනම් කියන්නේ ප්‍රශ්න අපි බලමු ඒක clarify කරගන්න. Or are you clear with that, or just provide me with the feedback? Feedback එකක් දෙන්න බලන්න. Yes. So even if you would like to add something, yeah. So this particular relationship must be identified, right? You can start with the accounting practice. Even the accounting practice is determined by the accounting values, and accounting values is influenced by the societal values. That's how you treat. So if you want to be more specific, depending on the empirical results, you can bring this. So if you want to talk about the relationship between the professionalism and the societal values, you can say, put it like the low power distance, low uncertainty avoidance, and high individualism is linked to professionalism. Similarly, if you want to talk about conservatism, how it relates, high uncertainty avoidance, low individualism, and low masculinity is related to conservatism. And that's how you must elaborate the relationship, depending on the empirical results. So the empirical results එක මේ සම්බන්ධතාවය පැහැදිලි කරනවා නම් ඒ විදිහට තමයි පැහැදිලි කරන්න. Right? Okay. Hope you are clear with that. Now we are moving on to the harmonization or the international adoption of IFRS. So far we have discussed, first I take you through what is international accounting. Then we saw that we can define the international accounting at 3 levels. Initially at the universal level, and then even at a very narrow level, a company level, then even at a comparative level. Then we have discussed the factors that makes the accounting practices are different. Accounting practices of the countries are different, or the reasons behind diverse accounting practices. The one major factor was the environmental factors. The other one was the culture. That is what we have discussed so far. Now we are coming to achieving the harmonization or convergence of accounting practices. Convergence of accounting practices. The one major way that we can achieve this convergence or harmonization, that is through the international adoption of IFRS. So if the whole world is applying one set of accounting standards, then yes, there you can achieve this harmonization or standardization. So currently, as I told you, in fact, there I mentioned that over 180 countries. To correct that, it is exactly 166 countries, At the moment, 166 countries are adopting IFRS. මම කලින් කිව්වා රටවල් 180කට වඩා කියලා නැහැ. මම චෙක් කරා. ඒකට latest countries 166ක් තමයි මේ IFRS adapt කරන්නේ. Right? So therefore, to a large extent, we have achieved that harmonization or the convergence. The worldwide accounting diversity creates challenges for international business operation and investment. So from the very beginning, you asked me, why harmonization? Why convergence? This is the reason. So the worldwide accounting diversity creates challenges for international business operation and investment. It is costly for the multinational enterprises to restate their account to meet the requirement of every jurisdiction in which they report. You know, especially when it comes to multinational business, they have business throughout the world. In such an instance, if they are to report under different jurisdiction, they are to prepare their financial statement applying the local accounting standards, it is certainly going to be a very costly exercise for these multinational entities, especially then when they are going to consolidate. So certainly they have to again convert this financial statement prepared applying the local standard to that of the financial statement prepared based on IFRS. දැන් international multinational entity එකක් දැන් රටවල් ගණනාවක ඔපරේට් වෙනවානේ. ඒකට එක් country එකේ different accounting standards නම් තියෙන්නේ. ඒ different accounting standards apply කරලා තමයි financial statements හදන්න වෙන්නේ. That is the requirement. නමුත් අපි consolidated view එකක් ගන්න මේ financial statement අපිට ආපහු IFRS based විදිහට convert කරන්න වෙනවා. ඒතර එතනදී තමයි අපිට complete picture එකක් multinational entities වලට ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. So if that is the case, it is going to be extra burden. ඒතර මුලින්ම local standards apply කරලා හදන්න ඕනේ. ඊට පස්සේ ආපහු මේ financial statements ටිකම convert කරන්න ඕනේ IFRS based විදිහට. ඒතර එතන extra burden එකක්. But if all the countries are adopting one accounting standard, one set of accounting standard, then that particular cost is not there. So it is beneficial for the multinational entities. And also, investors also incur cost in comparing the results of companies. So similarly, if you are a kind of a global investor, so when it comes to the financial statements, you need to compare. So when it comes to the comparison may be meaningless if those prepared under different accounting standards, right? In that sense, if you had one set of accounting standards, certainly that is going to benefit the investors. So therefore, considering that, we are in favor of harmonization or standardization of accounting practice. That's why the world is moving towards the IFRS. That is the main argument that they even put forward, right? In promoting the IFRS, they try to bridge these national differences and to have one set of accounting standards for the whole world. There has been a growing demand for international accounting standards. And the today's context, if we see that, yes, the whole world is accepting these IFRSs at an accelerated rate. So we find that in a very intensive manner, the countries are moving towards IFRS. Right, harmonization and convergence. We use these terms, but we did not elaborate on that. Now we are going to look at these terms in depth. A number of approaches have been taken to bring the adoption of international accounting. So when you come to this international adoption of these accounting standards, the adoption of IFRS, there can be different approaches. These promoters can take. That is Iasb. Iasb can take actually two paths. One is about the harmonization, other one is the convergence. So in harmonization, what happens is that, or let me start with the convergence because that is easy. The convergence is a process that takes place over time. Yes, it takes certain time. It implies the adoption of one set of standard across the globe. In under a convergence project, what the promoters of this international financial reporting standards, or the promoters of IFRS is doing, is that they try to have one set of accounting standard for the whole world. So convergence එකක් යටතේ මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ISB එක උත්සාහ කරනවා achieve කරගන්න one set of accounting standard for the whole world. By now, as I said earlier, they are quite successful in that they have managed to convince 166 countries to adopt this IFRS. Then what is the harmonization? So most of the time we are using these two terms interchangeably, but if you look at in depth, there is a difference. What is that? It is again a process that takes place over time, but this implies the reconciling the different point of view and reducing the diversity, while allowing countries to have different set of accounting standards. So what is the position of the promoters of IFRS if they are taking a harmonization approach? So they try to minimize the diversity. So they understand the reality that given the environmental factors, given the cultural factors, the accounting practices are different. So they accept that fact. So having understood, they try to minimize the diversity. They try to reduce this diversify and still allowing the differences among the accounting standards. So considering the situation, the country-specific situation, they simply allow the differences to be there. So that is the harmonization. And it is said that when it comes to the IASB, International Accounting Standards Board, they are taking a convergence approach, whereas the body who was responsible, who was there before the IASB, that we call it International Accounting Standards Committee, before 2001, they were considering about the harmonization. Their approach was harmonization, but now the IASB is taking the convergence, right? So are you clear with that harmonization and convergence? In the convergence, one set of accounting standards for the whole world, no differences, no material differences, I would say. But harmonization, still the differences are accepted, but try their level best to reduce the diversity in different accounting practices. Are you clear with that? So come on, I don't get any interaction, right? This is trying to be, this tend to be a one-way communication. So which you may feel bored and even I may feel bored. Yeah, clear, right? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Let's move on. Right. Okay. Now, yeah. Who needs harmonization? Who needs convergence in accounting practices? This is something actually I discussed. Who are in favor of this convergence project? So that is in fact the investors and financial analysts. They are in favor of one set of accounting standards. So if you are a global investor, you would love to see that the financial statements are being prepared applying one set of accounting standard. So then you know the financial statements are comparable, then you can make more informed decisions, more informed investment decisions. So hence investors and financial analysts are in favor of this convergence and harmonization. And not only that, even the accounting profession is in favor of that. So if you take a professional accounting bodies, so they are in favor of that, because you know, if you are to adopt this IFRS, you have a very comprehensive set of standard you can establish, even if you don't have a kind of well codified accounting standards. So you can have a very comprehensive set of accounting standards overnight, right? So එක දවසකින් ඔයාට comprehensive accounting standard set එකක් තියෙනවා. The country එකක් විදිහට this was especially the case when it comes to the African countries. So most of the African countries, they were not having a very well codified accounting standards. But since they adopt this IFRS, so they have a very comprehensive set of globally accepted set of accounting standards. So the accounting profession benefits, the professional accounting bodies, even the industry, right? Everyone benefits. Then the multinational company, certainly. So they have operation throughout the world. So if you have one language, then they would prefer them the most. Even the government and revenue authorities. So the effort what they have to put in order to convert this financial statement would be reduced. So they can certainly benefit out of that. So therefore, there can be different parties who are in favor of that. Okay. So you want me to elaborate more on harmonization. Okay, let me go back to the previous slide. If I'm to tell that convergence, it is simply one set of accounting standard for the whole world, right? In that, what happens is that to a large extent, I would say, right? To a large extent, it is the one set of accounting standards. තර අපි හිතුවොත් 100%ක්ම සමහර අවස්ථාවල නැත්නම් 99%ක්ම එකම accounting standard set එකක් තමයි තියෙන්නේ. So if you take the present situation, if you go to Australia, you have IFRS based standard. If you take Sri Lanka, we have. So if you go to another context, they have that same. So likewise, the same set of accounting standards. Under harmonization, basically, what is their approach is that they understand that yes, there is a diversity. So given the environmental and cultural factors, there's a diversity in the accounting practice, right? Then what they are trying to do, they are trying to minimize these differences. They are trying to minimize these differences to the maximum possible, but at the same time, understanding the reality, accepting the reality, they allow the differences between the accounting standard. For example, uh, so if you take India and Sri Lanka situation, so as a promoter, when the Iasb uh, looking at promoting the IFRS in their context, they see some due to some cultural or even for environmental reasons, uh, they need to make some amendments to the accounting standards. They need to accept certain amendments. Yes, the ISB may be ready to do that. And even when it comes to Sri Lanka, looking at our context, given our cultural and environmental reason, they might, the ISP might have to accept certain amendments to the accounting standards. So they allow that. So therefore, it is about the different viewpoints. They simply let the different viewpoints to be there. And at the same time, they try to reduce the differences to the maximum possible, but still they allow the differences to be there. So that is about the harmonization. To the maximum possible, they achieve the uniformity, but still they allow some differences, right? So therefore, out of these two uh, types of approach, the convergence is about the one set of accounting standards for the whole world, but harmonization, they are in that pursuit. They need to have one set of accounting standards, but being more realistic, they allow some differences among the accounting standards of the different countries. So something like that. Okay. එතකොට convergence එක නම් එකම standard set එකක් තමයි මුළු ලෝකෙටම irrespective of the country, right? එතකොට ඒක ලංකාවටත් එකයි, ඉන්දියාවටත් එකයි, ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවටත් එකයි. නමුත් harmonization එකේදී අපි country specific factors වලට attend වෙලා ඒ තියෙන තත්ත්වයන් එක්ක පරිසර තත්ත්වයන් එක්ක accounting standard slightly modify කරනවා. එතකොට ඉන්දියාවේ තියෙන accounting standard එක අපිට වඩා වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන් යම් යම් aspects වලදී. So it is about the country specific country specific differences. So that is even same, no? Even if you take that, what you call that, the McDonald or even whatever the global franchise that goes to the India, considering their cultural aspect, they make differences, no? Burger King, no? I think that entity they are, or is it McDonald? I just can't remember that. They had to change that. They are predominantly using the beef. So beef as a main ingredient, but India, they cannot do that. So therefore, they adopted, and then they are taking chicken or something. So that is about the kind of harmonization. You're accepting that cultural differences, then you're adapting, something like that. But in convergence, that is not the case. If you are to serve beef, you try to serve beef throughout the world. Right. Okay. Then we are coming to the organization who involved in these projects. It is about, as you all know, International Accounting Standards Board is one of the main bodies who is behind this harmonization, especially when it comes to accounting. They are there. And even nowadays, we are talking more about the IIRC, International Integrated Reporting Council, you may learn later, and even the global reporting initiatives. Those are main organization behind this harmonization. And not only that, even the International Organization of Security Commission, the European Union, and the UNO, or even the World Bank, those are the promoters of this harmonization and convergence. Even when it comes to, even it may come in different ways, different forms, I would say. Even when they are passing some lendings to countries like Sri Lanka. So the one such requirement is that the country, the accounting profession must comply with the IFRS. So in a way that even the colonization projects are there, right? So therefore it is not always favorable, but you need to look at even it comes in different forms. In the form of colonization would also mean by these accounting standards, right? So somehow these are the global promoters of the convergence projects. So out of that, one of the main bodies we are talking about, that is Iasb. And here I have taken the structure of the International Accounting Standards Board. But I think it is better to have some insight from one who has represented one of these bodies, and we are fortunate enough to have that personality with us. So I would like to invite you, I think Chalani, right?
Yes, sir.
If
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not mistaken, yeah, Chalani. So Chalani has previously recently worked in attached to this IASP, and she may be having a kind of strong understanding about that. Then we would like to invite you to share your experience with us. Over to you, Chalani.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. I worked there from 2018 April to 2020, that is last year, August, end of August. I worked as an assistant technical staff member, and it's a fixed term position. I worked on a contract basis. So basically, there are two staff levels, like technical staff levels. There are permanent technical staff and assistant technical staff. And these technical staff report to the IASB, the board members. So the IASB is the standard setting body, and there are 14 board members. So these board members represent different continents in the world. So for example, from Asia, we have one board member from China and another board member from Japan.
Yes.
Likewise, from Europe, from Africa, from America. I mean, in America, there's a special thing. From Latin America, there's a one board member from Brazil, and there's another board member from Canada, from more north side. And interestingly, there are two board members even from USA, even though they apply US GAAP.
Yeah.
So I think, to my understanding, is the IASB and the FASB. FASB is the body incorporated in the US similar to IASB, who set the rule-based standards, the US GAAP. So they do quite closely work. So IASB wants to be in touch and discuss the differences, and they just try to bring more consistency as much as possible. But there are, of course, a lot of differences. So interestingly, there are two board members even from US, but not necessarily they are US GAAP experts, but there is this US presence in the IASB board members composition. So there are 14 board members, and this board is appointed by a board called trustees. If you, in the slide there is this IFRS Foundation.
Yeah.
There's a particular board called Board of Trustees, and they are the people. They are the board appointing the ISB members, and they are the governing body overseeing the performance of the ISB members, whether they are developing the standards in compliance with their due process.
Yeah.
So, and apart from that, there is this monitoring board which oversee the board of trustees, and this monitoring board has external organizations like regulators, IOSCO, external parties, and they appoint the board of trustees which are in the IFRS Foundation, and the board of trustees report to monitoring board. So when it comes to ISB work, so we all know that they are trying to develop one set of single accounting standards which can be applied by all jurisdictions, all companies except US. So to achieve their this ambition, they also take the advice from a body called IFRS Advisory Council. They provide this, as you see in the slide, strategic advice they provide. And this advisory council consists of independent professional expertise from different industries. So it is just a very transparent process, even again in the appointment of this IFRS Advisory Council, who provides strategic advice to the IASB. And so there is this IFRS Interpretation Committee. We have these standards which are principle based. But when it comes to the application, there might be some certain questions that might emerge from the practice. So what people like us from external parties, maybe from the profession, maybe from the academia, maybe from regulators, we can direct our questions to this interpretation committee. So they are trying to interpret the requirements, the principles in the ISB standards, and they are discussing it publicly. And the committee advises the IASB whether those practical questions can be applied using the ISB standards. If not, the interpretation committee, suggest the ISB to amend standards or reconsider, or maybe in the most of the instances it is to amend the standards. So basically, I worked on a project called Amendments to IFRS 17.
Yeah.
So it is the latest accounting standard. It was issued in 2017 May, and I joined in 2018 May. So it was, I actually had to contribute to the implementation phase of the standard, because the standard is due to be effective on at that time. 1st January 2022, that is next year.
Yeah.
But sir, there was a lot of pressure coming from different stakeholders saying these principles do not work in our context. And so as you explained, there are certain environmental differences, cultural differences. So for those reasons, they say these principles are very costly for us to apply, or we have different insurance products. So even though the ISB had published the final version of the standard after a very thorough consultation process, ISB had to reconsider certain principles. So they again started a new project to amend certain principles in the IFRS 17. So I worked on that, and those amendments were issued in June 2020, that is last year. So that was my experience. That sir explained that there is a pressure and the differences in different countries coming into place, and how ISB is trying to converge these differences into one set of global accounting standards. So this is in a nutshell, this is my experience. So
yeah, it is really interesting, right? So we are quite pleased to hear that. Thank you very much, Shalini.
Thank
So
you,
you
sir.
have explained it really nice. So I think every one of you have got a very comprehensive idea. So it was even interesting to hear you. When it comes to this IFRS Interpretation Committee, what the issue, we call it IFRIX, right?
Yeah, IFRIX.
Time to time
And
we issue IFRIX, yeah.
yeah, they also issue agenda decisions. IFRIX are certain more interpretative in manner, but agenda decisions try to kind of specifically focus on type of application questions, so people can submit the fact patterns, specific fact patterns. So interpretation committee, they will explain how the IASB standard will be applied to that particular fact pattern.
Right. And even time to time, as you have very correctly explained, that these concerns are going to be accommodated in the accounting standards.
Yes.
So these whatever the interpretations that they are issuing, in time to time, they are getting accommodated in the accounting standards.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So especially when it comes to that revenue standard change, and also the latest one, what you call that, the leases, all these things over time, these changes are being accommodated, and finally they come out as a kind of a standard.
Yes, new standard. Yes.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, it is really interesting, right? Thank you very much, Chalani, once again.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, right. So it is about, in a nutshell, how this IASB basically operates. And I think it is a not-for-profit organization. Chalani?
Yes, a not-for-profit
Yeah,
organization,
not-for-profit
public interest.
organization. Right. Then if you have to look at the role of this IASB, as it was very well explained by Chalani, so they look at the formulation and publishing the accounting standard and to promote their worldwide acceptance. So that is the good thing. They do not simply formulate and publish the accounting standards. Even they go beyond that, they even extend the support for their acceptance worldwide. Even myself, I can remember in 2013, when it was introduced, there was a kind of a training, several training programs was organized by the ICSL Sri Lanka, and it was supported by these global bodies. So they are supporting with the application. So that is the good thing. And also they seek to work on the improvements and standardization of regulation, accounting standards and procedures. So they try to achieve this standardization across the several countries. So far, they have managed to convince 166 countries. The ISB approach to accounting regulation, however, essentially follows an Anglo-American model, or it is in the sense it is a principle-based approach. As I repeatedly told you, they are taking a principle-based approach to accounting standard setting. So in contrast, if you take the US, they are taking a rule-based approach. The US caps, we call it rule-based, but ISB, it is a principle-based approach. Then the benefits of IFRS. In fact, we have discussed that, but just to take you through. So as I told you, so if you adopt this IFRS, it is going to be a cost-effective way to institute a comprehensive system of accounting standards. Especially if you imagine a country who is not having a well-codified set of accounting standard. So if you take this, the decision to converge your accounting standard with that of the global, the IFRS, then overnight, you have a very comprehensive set of accounting standards. So in that way, it is a very cost effective rather than discussing the things in local and doing it on your own. So doing it in-house by the local professional accounting body, if you simply take the decision to convert, so you have a very promising set of accounting standards even overnight. And it enhanced the operation and globalization of capital market. So the government would love to see that. So if they are to attract the foreign investment, so they need this capital market to be global. So as a particular aspect that would support this globalization is going to be the accounting standards. So if you apply the globally accepted accounting standard, that will certainly promote this globalization. So the global investors would love to come and invest in the local market. So if you want to achieve the globalization of the capital market, yes, one proper mechanism that you can adopt is the adoption of the IFRS. And also it reduces the cost for financial report preparation. So especially this is again a benefit that goes to the multinational companies. So if they are to prepare even the consolidated financial statements, so when all the financial statements are prepared by applying one set of standard, it is quite easy for them. They don't have to incur an extra cost. Even that is beneficial for the investors. So everything is already in a comparable form. Financial statements are comparable. Now go and make an informed decision. And not only that, from the practitioner's point of view, this is going to be quite beneficial, because the skill what you get in one country is applicable in another context. Say that you have worked in Sri Lanka. So if you want to move to Australia, then no problem. You can easily adapt to that accounting practice, because the skill what you have learned, if you are thorough in the IFRS, SLFRS, then that is nothing different from the accounting standards of Australia or even New Zealand. So you can well settle, your skill is transportable. So these are some of the benefits what the IFRS would promise. Then at the same time, this adoption is not always free from challenges. It has certain challenges. The one thing what we have extensively discussed, the environmental factors and the cultural factors would serve as a barrier to IFRS adoption. So we may not be able to achieve the harmonization or the convergence because of these environmental issues, or even the cultural one, even maybe the religious one, right? And then the enforcement issues. When it comes to accounting standard like SLFRS 13, the fair value based measurement. So there, it is meant for the developed countries. It is not something meant for the developing countries. So as I said, that the only instance where we have a active market, right, for a particular asset, that is going to be the share market. But apart from that, we don't have market for other assets like property. We don't have an active market. For motor vehicle, we don't have an active market. But in contrast, if you take a developed country, they may have some market, so advanced market for these different assets. So therefore, fair valuing is not a hard job for them. But in a country like Sri Lanka, we may have to use lots of estimation when you come to deriving a fair value. So therefore, the enforcement, it is going to be problematic. So we cannot rely on the market-based approach, but instead we may have to go for some alternative approach, or even need to make some adjustment for the inputs what we may be having. So the enforcement issues are there. And also the technical issues. Though we are saying that the convergence is possible, within the standard itself, there are different kinds of measurement. So for example, so if you take the PP standard, so in that subsequently you can either go for cost model or fair value model. So therefore, there can be some, even within a particular country, there can be differences. So some entities may perceive the cost model, while some may perceive the revaluation model. So therefore, comparability or the convergence may not necessarily be there because of these technical issues. So within the standard itself, there are some differences. So therefore, these are some of the challenges in achieving the convergence in IFRS adoption. But to a large extent, so nothing in this world is perfect. So it applies for this project, the IFRS convergence. So to a large extent, it is successful, but still there are certain challenges there, like environmental, enforcement, and technical. Okay, with that note, we are going to conclude the discussion. So if I want to summarize what we discussed, initially we start with the definition of international accounting, where we define international accounting at 3 levels: the universal level, the company level, and at the middle, comparative accounting. Then we discuss mainly the environmental factors and then the cultural factors, which would warrant a difference in the accounting practices. And then we discuss about the adoption of IFRS and its benefit, the harmonization approach, and also the convergence approach, the parties who benefit, the parties, and also the inherent limitation of this IFRS. So that was about the international accounting and IFRS adoption. Okay, so that is all what is expected for the today's discussion. So if you have anything to get clarified or add, now it is the time. Okay, I think you'll are fine with that. Even if you have any question, even you can talk to me, and you can even email and get them clarified, right? Okay, then thank you very much. See you in the next class.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.